Chapter 2702. At this moment, with the help of Luo Qingtong, their injuries had healed, and their strength had increased at the same time. They blocked the people of the evil moon sect. Although the latter's strength had increased with the help of Yu Mingqian, they were only on par with them. At this moment, the cooperation of Zhang Beiyue and the others was obviously higher. Boom! Zhang Beiyue and the others blocked the people of the evil moon sect. When Yu Mingqian saw this scene, his eyes immediately darkened. Xie Qi actually had pills that could be used in this abandoned continent. What was the other party's background? Yu Mingqian was the young master of the Inscription Association, and his status was far from that of ordinary people. He was also highly valued by the Inscription Association, so he could get those pills. However, the pills that Luo Qingtong took out were obviously much more effective than his. At least, when he helped the people of the evil moon sect recover their strength and heal their injuries, it was far less effective than Luo Qingtong's pills. His pills also had his self-made medicine inscription array added to them, which was why they had such an effect. What was Luo Qingtong relying on? His face was gloomy and he didn't know why, but he felt very uneasy. He felt that the other party had too many tricks up her sleeve. Yu Mingqian had already fallen for Luo Qingtong several times before. Previously, the other party had escaped once in Inscription City. Later, the inscription man-searching array was useless, so it was another time. Later on, he lurked beside Luo Qingtong, but he couldn't get close to her. It was another time. Yu Mingqian had never spent so much effort on anyone before, but he didn't gain anything. No matter if it was before or now, there was only Luo Qingtong who could make him waste his efforts to such an extent. This time he absolutely couldn't let her escape. As Yu Mingqian thought this, his eyes suddenly darkened. Without thinking, he rushed in the direction of Luo Qingtong. At the same time, he waved his left hand. Berserk! As his voice rang out, the people of the evil moon sect suddenly froze. Then, almost instantly, they let out indescribably shrill cries. That voice was like the roar of a beast. It was filled with a berserk and unconscious feeling. Then, with a boom, the demonic moon sect members turned into beasts that only knew how to attack and not defend under Yu Mingqian's signal. This was what Yu Mingqian had done to the demonic moon sect members. How could it be so easy to receive benefits from him? Not to mention, these demonic moon sect members were actually disloyal. They wanted to betray him and threaten him with Luo Qingtong. Yu Mingqian used the inscription pattern array he had inscribed on their bodies to easily control them. From the moment these demonic moon sect members agreed to cooperate with Yu Mingqian, they had already embarked on a path of no return. It was just that they didn't know. Yu Mingqian had never intended to let them live in the first place. It wasn't just them. Except for Luo Qingtong, he wasn't going to let go of anyone here. Boom! Yu Mingqian's figure swept towards Luo Qingtong. After the demonic moon sect members went berserk, they attacked Zhang Beiyue and the others even more fiercely than before. Because they only wanted to attack and not defend, the sudden violent attack made Zhang Beiyue and the others unable to resist for a while. Chapter 2703. Bang! The defensive line formed by Zhang Beiyue and the others was suddenly torn open. An expert of the Zhang family was blasted back more than a dozen steps. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood and was seriously injured. Fortunately, he still had the elixir that Luo Qingtong had given him. He immediately took one. His injuries were stabilized, but the place where he was at had been broken through by someone else. Boom! Yu Mingqian's figure swept towards Luo Qingtong and appeared in front of her in an instant. Boom! He raised his hand to grab Luo Qingtong. At the same time, his other hand directly hit Yi Qianxian beside her. Master! Evil doctor! Bei Qing, Fengyu and the others saw this and hurried forward to stop him. However, their strength had been sealed by Yi Qianxian. The latter had not woken up yet, so they could not unlock the seal. The strength that they could exert was limited. Yu Mingqian was afraid of their strength, so he raised his hand and blasted a battle inscription mark. Combined with his strength, this attack was comparable to the 9th level of the Earth martial arts realm. Boom! Bei Qing, Fengyu and the others were blasted back several steps by the power of the attack. Although their physical strength was tyrannical and there was almost no injury, they could not stabilize their bodies. Just as they were about to be forced back, a dazzling sword light slashed out from behind them. Boom! Luo Qingtong's life and death yin-yang sword appeared in an instant and directly cut the battle inscription pattern that had blasted away Bei Qing, Fengyu and the others. Its power and speed were slightly reduced. At the same time, a giant claw suddenly slapped out from her body. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed and the sky changed color. The giant claw suddenly appeared in the air and directly hit Yu Mingqian's palm, blasting him away. This giant claw belonged to Little Pig, who had just turned into a wolf not long ago. He bitterly looked at the strength that he had just recovered, but it was gone in an instant. His heart was filled with tears. It was like this every time. When would he be able to show off for a while? Wimpy. Little Pig angrily looked at Yu Mingqian in front of Luo Qingtong and then slapped out with his claw. Luo Qingtong had reached the level of the Venerable Realm. His left front claw could be fully extended, and now his right claw could be slightly extended. It was equivalent to 2 consecutive attacks. Boom. Seeing another giant claw emerge from the void, Yu Mingqian's eyes turned cold. His right hand quickly drew a battle inscription pattern in front of him. The seal was formed almost instantaneously. Boom. Little Pig's huge claw slammed onto the battle inscription pattern, shattering it into pieces. However, it didn't hurt Yu Minglian in the slightest. Tisk, it's a protection inscription, and the highest level one at that. How can this kid's inscription strength be so strong? It's illogical. Little Pig felt gloomy. It had been hiding in Luo Qingtong's body all this time and did not reveal any trace of itself. He thought that his sudden attack would definitely injure Yu Mingqian. He thought he would capture her and interrogate her about the Central Inscription Association. But he did not expect her inscription strength to be so strong. To instantly form a seal, even the previous Tian Mingzi would find it difficult to do so at his peak. Chapter 2704. While Little Pig was feeling depressed, Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly. Her eyes flickered as she copied the process of Yu Ming drawing the inscription mark into her eyes. It was a pity that she wasn't strong enough to use the battle inscription pattern. Otherwise she wouldn't know who would catch who today. Luo Qingtong's eyes flickered. While she copied the inscription pattern, the life and death yin-yang sword in her hand didn't stop. After breaking the battle inscription pattern that had blasted away Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others, she changed her move and swept it horizontally. Boom. The life and death yin-yang sword flashed and rushed toward Yu Mingqian. After blocking Little Pig's huge claw, Yu Mingqian rushed toward Luo Qingtong again. When he saw Luo Qingtong's ordinary and powerless sword light, Yu Mingqian didn't intend to dodge. But for some reason, when the sword light was about to split him, Yu Mingqian's heart suddenly tightened. A strong premonition suddenly flashed in his heart. He thought of Luo Qingtong's cunning. With her scheming mind, it didn't make sense for her to suddenly swing such a powerless and murderous sword attack. Although he didn't find anything wrong, Yu Mingqian drew a battle inscription pattern in front of him when the last sword light was about to strike him. Slash. When the sword light hit the battle inscription pattern, it suddenly turned as black as ink. The death blade's radiance flickered like an obsidian. Yu Mingqian's eyes instantly shrank when she saw the thick, deathly stillness energy. What a pity. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows. She felt very regretful. She didn't use any martial arts on purpose. She only used the sword light of the life and death yin-yang sword. Her purpose was to prevent Yu Mingqian from dodging. As long as such a strike landed on Yu Mingqian, Luo Qingtong was confident that she would be able to open a wound on his body. When the power of death invaded his body, it would be enough to destroy half of his life inscription mark. His strength would be greatly affected. Because Luo Qingtong had repaired the inscription mark of the city lord before, she naturally knew how to destroy the inscription mark in the shortest time possible. Even if Yu Mingqian's inscription skills were higher than Tianfeng city lord's, she could still destroy half of his life inscription mark. But he dodged it. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, her eyes suddenly narrowed and she suddenly retreated. Her figure was extremely fast and in an instant she had already left Yi Qianming's group. When Bei Qing and Fengyu saw this, they hurriedly chased after her. Luo Qingtong's strength couldn't be compared with Yu Mingqian's. If the evil doctor was really captured, they didn't need to live anymore. They could just kill themselves in front of Yi Qianxian. However, as soon as they rushed out, a few violent demonic moon sect members rushed out from the side and stopped them. It was Yu Mingqian who used his mind to call these violent evil moon sect members over. He wanted them to stop Bei Qing, Fengyu and the others. This time he would not let Luo Qingtong escape. His opponent had almost used up all his trump cards. Yu Mingqian had never seen anyone with the strength of an Empyrean realm like Luo Qingtong. She had almost defeated him. Putting aside the 2 giant claws from before, the sword light just now really made his hair stand on end. Yu Mingqian had no doubt that if he hadn't listened to the warning in his heart and blocked the sword light, he would have regretted it very much. However, he blocked it so Luo Qingtong couldn't escape from his hands. When he chased after Luo Qingtong's swoosh, Chapter 2705. Within his body, a terrifying power that could destroy the heavens and the earth circulated through his meridians like a sheathed sword or a roaring dragon. Like a dragon swimming in the sea, it returned to his dantian and was sealed up. Boom! A violent sound like a dragon's roar and a tiger's roar was suddenly emitted from his meridians, which had been repaired by 30%. In an instant, the roar that came from his meridians was like a stormy sea or a gust of wind, resounding throughout the cave world. Then, with a boom, Yi Qianxian's body was suddenly shaken by the residual power. This power was less than 1/3 of the power that was flowing in his body before, but when it was shaken out, it was as if the world was falling apart. In an instant, the figures of the evil moon sect people who were blocking Beiqing and Fengyu were shaken into invisible dust. Not even a drop of blood or flesh floated down from the sky. When the power in Yi Qianxian's body shook out, everyone present was stunned, especially Zhang Beiyue and the others. At this moment, they were being attacked by the evil moon sect people who had gone berserk and did not care about their lives. They were retreating step by step. However, at this moment, the roar of the meridians in Yi Qianxian's body suddenly shook. Their figures, along with the evil moon sect people, all froze for a moment. Under such circumstances, their gazes towards Yi Qianren were filled with shock and fear. The dragon's roar and tiger's roar that erupted from his body was too powerful. At that moment, they felt as if they were being stared at by a peerless, ferocious beast. As long as the other party wanted to, he could tear them to pieces in an instant. It was just a blast of energy and a roar, but it had such power and feeling. How strong was the other party's strength? How earth-shattering would it be if he unleashed it? Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others were pleasantly surprised. Master. They looked at Yi Qianxian, who seemed to be in the eye of a hurricane. Their faces were almost filled with tears of joy. How long had it been since they had felt Yi Qianxian's violent and tyrannical power? Although Yi Qianxian was able to display such a violent and shocking strength despite the tearing of his meridians, such strength could not be maintained for long. And every time he used it, Yi Qianxian's meridians would immediately be torn apart, causing rivers of blood to flow. For a very long time, he would not be able to use even the slightest bit of strength that his meridians could withstand. But at this moment, they could sense that Yi Qianxian's energy was long and continuous. It was obvious that he was brimming with energy and vitality. Moreover, Yi Qianxian's meridians were no longer torn. Clearly, this power did not exceed the limits of Yi Qianxian's meridians. Master's meridians have strengthened again. Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others had tears in their eyes. Only God knew how long they had been waiting for this miracle to happen. Although Luo Qingtong had strengthened Yi Qianxian's meridians to 10%, no one knew if she could continue to strengthen Yi Qianxian's meridians. Would there be any hindrances? Would she fail? Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others were hopeful but at the same time uneasy. Chapter 2706. Master will definitely be able to regain his former power. Moreover, his lifespan will no longer be limited by the heavenly vein body. The Tiandu body, which was said to be incurable, would die before the age of 28, and would not last more than 5 years at most, could finally be cured. This hope was limited to Luo Qingtong, and they did not know why Luo Qingtong was able to cure Yi Qianxian's heavenly vein body. However, Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others did not care about this. As long as Luo Qingtong could save Yi Qianxian, it would be fine. Moreover, Luo Qingtong was their future mistress. The more powerful she was, the better it would be for them. Thinking of this, they hurriedly said to Yi Qianxian, "Master, the evil doctor is being chased away. He should be an important figure in the Central Inscriptionist Union. His inscriptionist strength is comparable to an expert at LV9 of the Earth martial arts realm. He might be even stronger." When their words rang out, Yi Qianren's violent shockwaves also abruptly retracted. Then he looked coldly at Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others. He did not ask them why they did not stop the evil doctor. Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others, whose strength was sealed, could not deal with someone at LV9 of the Earth martial arts realm. With a swoosh, Yi Qianren's figure disappeared in front of everyone. Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others hurriedly chased after him. When they left, the people of the Zhan family came to their senses. They looked at themselves and the others. When they left, the people of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Feixing Lian family, who had been stunned by Yi Qianxian's power and Luo Qingtong's power, came to their senses. That person just now is so strong. Not only that, but Luo Xiaoqi's strength is also so strong. They were indescribably dispirited. They could not find a word to describe Yi Qianxian's strength. After all, this was a strength that shocked and frightened the people of the Zhan family. The people of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Feixing Lian family did not know how to describe this strength. But Luo Qingtong's strength? She was only in the venerable realm. How could she fight against the man in black? But the truth was, Luo Qingtong had escaped from Yu Mingqian's hands. Not only that, but the giant claw that emerged from her body and the sword in her hand. The Heavenly Wind Chu family and the Flying Star Lian family could not see the change on Yu Mingqian's face, but from his temporary pause, Luo Qingtong's attack should have affected him. An exalted realm cultivator against a LV9 martial realm cultivator. Unexpectedly, he was able to escape from the opponent's hands and was able to cause a certain amount of damage to the opponent. If the people of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have been dead already. They probably wouldn't have believed it at all. Chapter 2707. Chu Yuqing's words were spoken one at a time, and he felt like he was about to vomit blood. No one had expected Luo Qingtong to be so secretive. Xie Qi's identity hadn't been enough for them to pay attention to. After all, rumors couldn't be trusted. Who knew if what he said was true or false? Especially his identity as a battle spirit master. That was complete nonsense. But the strength Luo Qingtong had just revealed was something they couldn't ignore. Luo Qingtong was able to fight against someone in the 9th level of the Earth Martial Realm. Even if it was only for a moment, it was enough to shock everyone. They didn't know Luo Qingtong's name or who she was. Naturally, they could only start with the Red Flame Mercenary Group. After all, they didn't know whether or not she had anything to do with Tianfeng Inscription City. But her relationship with the Red Flame Mercenary Group was obvious to all. When Chu Yuqing's voice sounded, Chu Jingyi immediately laughed mockingly. "I'm afraid you won't have the chance to apologize in the future." As he spoke, he looked at the unconscious Chu Lingfeng who was being supported by the others. The latter had struggled too violently and wanted to help Luo Qingtong, but had been knocked unconscious by the others. Chu Yuqing had plotted to kill Chu Lingfeng. His family wouldn't let him off. Now he wanted to apologize to Xie Qi? But when he spoke, Chu Yuqing's expression turned ugly. He sneered and said, "That might not be the case. After all, I didn't try to steal her from him." Chu Yuqing was naturally talking about Yi Qianxian. In his opinion, Chu Lingfeng had taken a fancy to Luo Qingtong and was trying to steal her from Yi Qianxian. When the time came, it was hard to say who would be the unlucky one. If Yi Qianxian became unhappy and attacked the Tianfeng Chu family, who knew if Chu Lingfeng would still be able to hold on to his position as the young master? After all, his opponent's strength wasn't just for show. When they heard Chu Yuqing's words, the expressions of Chu Jingyi and the others also turned ugly. They also had a headache over Chu Lingfeng's improper thoughts towards Luo Qingtong. Previously, because of Chu Lingfeng's identity as the young master, his feelings for Luo Qingtong were absolutely impossible. But now, it was all because of Yi Qianxian's identity. Since the other party was so powerful, he was definitely not an ordinary person. His young master snatching someone from the other party was simply courting death. As Chu Jingyi and the others thought this, they no longer had any thoughts of targeting Chu Yuqing and the others. Everyone was thinking about what to do. How could he make Chu Lingfeng give up on Luo Qingtong? If Chu Lingfeng knew what they were thinking, he would definitely shout loudly that he did not have such thoughts about his master. He would not fight with Yi Qianxian for her. Chapter 2708. Her figure was extremely fast. Relying on the geographical position of this cave world, she rapidly shuttled through this cave world. This cave world was vast, and there was not much difference between it and the abandoned continent world on the surface. The only difference was that one was on the surface, and the other was underground. Otherwise, no matter how powerful Luo Qingtong's blood eyes were, there was no way she could escape from Yu Mingqian's pursuit. Of course, she also had no way to get rid of him. Yu Mingqian's breath firmly locked onto her. The power of inscriptions around his body gathered, and inscription patterns appeared one after another, rushing in all directions. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong's powerful blood eyes and the life and death yin and yang sword in her hand that was extremely good at cutting any illusory and energy, Yu Mingqian's inscription patterns would not have been able to catch up and trap her. With Yu Mingqian's inscription skills and martial arts strength, he would have caught her long ago. After Luo Qingtong's figure dodged his inscription attacks several times and was not affected by his inscription patterns at all, Yu Mingqian knew that it was impossible to use his identity as an inscription master to keep Luo Qingtong here. If it were an ordinary warrior, they would have been trapped by his inscription technique. Since it was useless against Luo Qingtong, he would not use it. With his martial arts strength, he could still catch Luo Qingtong in his hands. He did not believe that she could keep escaping. Thinking this, Yu Mingqian suddenly changed his strategy. The inscription patterns surrounding his body no longer rushed towards Luo Qingtong, but scattered in all directions, blocking Luo Qingtong's way of turning back and circling around. She could only keep moving forward. In this way, unless there was no end to this cave world, he would be able to catch Luo Qingtong sooner or later. Boom. When Yu Mingxian's inscription patterns scattered in all directions, Luo Qingtong also felt the power behind her change. She felt that Yu Mingxian's inscription patterns scattered in all directions, and everywhere she went was covered in the aura of inscriptions. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly. The other party was indeed powerful. This move made it impossible for her to take a detour or lead the other party in circles. In this way, as long as she ran to the end, she could only obediently surrender. Fortunately, she didn't run around randomly this time to stall for time. Is what you said true? Do you feel that the power of the great Tao here is even denser? Luo Qingtong asked Little Pig as she leaped forward. The latter had already appeared in her mind, squatting on her shoulder. Her 4 little hooves were grabbing her clothes, and her 2 pink little ears were bouncing along with the sound of the Luo Qingtong's wind. I can't be wrong. I didn't sense it before either. However, when I first revealed myself, I clearly sensed that the great Tao energy here was even denser. Little Pig's voice rang in Luo Qingtong's ears. It turned out that he was the one who told Luo Qingtong to withdraw from Yi Qianxian's group and run here. After all, the great Tao energy here was so dense. If she threw the little dumpling in, there might be a chance to solve Luo Qingtong's current crisis. What else could she do? Stay there and be captured? The power in Yi Qianxian's body had gone out of control, and he wouldn't be able to help for a while. Therefore Little Pig told Luo Qingtong to run quickly. Chapter 2709. She looked at the direction Little Pig was leading her and raised her eyebrows slightly. The great Tao energy is denser than the heart of the continent? Could it be that the heart of the continent is fake? That was what she thought, but then she denied it. Those spirit beasts and great Tao spirits were protecting the heart of the continent. It was obvious that it wasn't a fake heart of the continent. At this moment, she didn't encounter a single spirit beast as she rushed into the depths of the cave world. Clearly, those spirit beasts had all gone forward. That heart of the continent was definitely real. There was only one possibility. The place ahead where the power of the Great Path was denser was probably the key to the change in the heart of the continent on this abandoned continent. Was that the true reason those spirit beasts and great Tao spirits appeared? Luo Qingtong's eyes brightened as she thought of this. She thought of the reason Zhang Beiyue and the others appeared. They were definitely here for the treasure in the heart of the continent. However, they had all been mistaken, including her. Because of the heart of the continent and the appearance of those spirit beasts and great Tao spirits, all of them thought that the treasure was in the heart of the continent. After all, it gave birth to the Sky Luo grass. And those spirit beasts and great Tao spirits were desperately protecting the heart of the continent. Coupled with the various changes in the abandoned continent, they mistakenly thought that the treasure was closely related to the heart of the continent, or even appeared in the treasure. However, they forgot one thing. That was, these two things didn't have much of a connection at all. Even if the demon beasts in the cave world were nurtured into spirit beasts by the treasure, their mission was still to protect the heart of the continent, not the treasure. They were misled by the actions of those spirit beasts and great Tao spirits. That treasure affected the heart of the continent, but it might not be in the heart of the continent. If Little Pig hadn't sensed the difference in the great Tao energy when he transformed, they would have been completely mistaken. As of this moment, the direction she was heading in was the true location of the rare treasure. Luo Qingtong's eyes shone brightly as she thought of this. Swoosh! Her figure flashed forward at a high speed. Soon, she arrived at the place where Little Pig had led her to. This is the place. Little Pig raised his little hoof and pointed at the pitch-black abyss in front of them. It was unknown just how long the abyss was. It's right below here. Yu Mingxian's figure had already appeared not far behind Luo Qingtong. His figure had been chasing after Luo Qingtong's figure. At this moment, seeing her appear in front of this pitch-black abyss that stretched for who knew how long, his eyes narrowed slightly. For some reason, the abyss in front of him gave him a very bad feeling. If possible, he didn't want Luo Qingtong to escape. Xie, you can't escape. As long as you tell me about the inscription of God and obtain it for me, I won't hurt you. His voice was cold. This was the first time Yu Mingxian had tried to negotiate with someone who was weaker than her. In this world, only Xie could do this. If Yu Mingxian's thoughts towards Luo Qingtong before were playful and indifferent, then she wouldn't care about it at all. She didn't even care, thinking that she could easily achieve her goal. Chapter 2710. She was definitely the most difficult person he had ever met. Yu Mingqian could temporarily give up his principles for her, so that she could talk terms with him. However, the moment he said that, Luo Qingtong chuckled. So it's for the inscription of God. It's a pity that I'm not going to tell you. Luo Qingtong's eyes turned cold. Yu Mingqian's conditions were indeed sincere. Indeed, he sincerely wanted to negotiate with her. However, the inscription of God was one of her biggest secrets. She inherited the inscription of the Immortal Slayer Palace and their hatred. Even if Luo Qingtong had no intention of carrying this big trouble for the Immortal Slayer Palace, the enemies of the Immortal Slayer Palace would not let her go for this secret. Under such circumstances, how could she give up on the inscription of God? Moreover, if she told them about the inscription of God, she would have to hand over the life and death sword. This was impossible for Luo Qingtong. If Yu Mingqian had asked for it when she got the inheritance of the Immortal Slayer Palace, and he didn't threaten her, she might have considered it. But this would. Luo Qingtong looked at Yu Mingqian and sneered. Snatch it first and talk terms later. Did he think she was a fool? She didn't like the feeling of being a fish on a chopping block. Moreover, Yu Mingqian wanted to know the whereabouts of the inscription of God so badly. How could he be sure that he was telling the truth? He wouldn't hurt her. But in this world, there were many ways to make people feel like they were dead and leave no trace of injury. Luo Qingtong could find many ways to do it. Would a person like Yu Mingqian not leave a way out for himself? He was afraid that if she agreed, then her life and death would no longer be in his hands. She might even be asked to be loyal to him. Luo Qingtong was not interested in any of this. Instead, she was very interested in seeing him suffer. Xieqi. Yu Mingqian's eyes darkened. He looked at Luo Qingtong. He had already made such a concession. She was actually unwilling. Did she really think that she could escape from the palm of his hand? Yu Mingqian had already lost her patience. He was very afraid of Luo Qingtong escaping again and again. But if it wasn't for the whereabouts of the god's inscription, how could he let them escape again and again? Just because he wasn't ruthless to Luo Qingtong, it didn't mean that he couldn't. Don't force me. As he spoke, he shook off the power around him with a boom. Seeing his actions, Luo Qingtong's eyes suddenly narrowed. If she guessed correctly, the other party had most likely seen through her intentions. With Yu Mingqian's strength, if she really wanted to stop Luo Qingtong at all costs and prevent her from entering the abyss, then if Luo Qingtong rushed into the abyss, she would be walking right into a trap. But if she didn't go to the abyss, Luo Qingtong had no other way to go in this cave world. Yu Mingqian's scheming was outstanding. If she really couldn't enter the abyss, it was only a matter of time before she was caught by the other party. Luo Qingtong thought so, and suddenly her eyes turned slightly. Okay, I can promise you. Luo Qingtong's words stopped here. Suddenly, her eyes brightened and she looked behind Yu Mingqian and shouted. Brother, you're here? Let's do it together. Chapter 27:11. Then, her figure suddenly shot up and rushed in the direction of Yu Mingqian. Yu Mingqian had been paying attention to Luo Qingtong's movements. When she changed her words and agreed, his eyes became vigilant. Then, when he heard Luo Qingtong's words, he hesitated for a moment. Was what the other party said true or false? Luo Qingtong's change of words did seem like she was deliberately attracting his attention so that others could make a move. But this woman's mind was cunning. It was very likely that she was deliberately putting on this act for him to see. Which one was the fake one? Was there someone behind her, or was Luo Qingtong deliberately tricking him? Yu Mingqian's mind was spinning rapidly. When Luo Qingtong's figure shot up and rushed towards him, he finally made a decision. This was true. There was indeed someone behind him. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong's actions would have been to immediately retreat and enter the abyss after calling out that there was someone behind him. Yu Mingqian thought so and immediately blocked Luo Qingtong's sword light with an attack. At the same time, he abruptly turned around and faced the person behind him. A terrifyingly dense power pulsed around his body. In just an instant, countless high-level battle inscription patterns condensed around Yu Mingqian's body. These battle inscription patterns, no matter which one it was, were not something that an ordinary battle spiritualist could condense. But at this moment, beside Yu Mingqian, it was as simple as eating and drinking. It was condensed directly. At this moment, the strength that Yu Mingqian displayed was almost at the peak. The strength of a battle spiritualist was originally far more tyrannical than that of an ordinary martial arts expert. Now, with the support of Yu Mingqian's inscription pattern technique, the strength that he could display was even more terrifying to the extreme. If this strength was used against Luo Qingtong, even with the help of the Blood Eye, the latter would not be able to successfully enter the abyss under his attack. The only possibility was that she would be injured by him and then captured. Her life might even be in danger. However, this power wasn't directed at Luo Qingtong. Instead, it was directed behind Yu Mingquan. Seeing Yu Mingqian's actions, Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up with a dark light mixed with blood. Then, a laughter that sounded like silver bells rang out. "Thank you for sending me off. I won't stand on ceremony since you've done me such a great favor." As Luo Qingtong spoke up to this point, the sword in her hand changed its angle in an instant. With a boom, it chopped down on Yu Mingquan's attack. In just an instant, under the precisely calculated angle, the aftermath of the collision of the two attacks erupted. Luo Qingtong's figure was like a blue swan and white crane. In an instant, she rode the wind and borrowed the force of the shockwave to rush towards the abyss behind her. Then wouldn't Yu Mingquan's strength have risen to a terrifying level? Then what was she still doing? She would just surrender without putting up a fight. Therefore, after discovering that her strength had stopped at the 9th level of the Purple Venerable Realm, Luo Qingtong's anxious heart was immediately relieved. She was really afraid that the power of this sea of power of the Great Path could help her continue to improve. Chapter 27:13. Luo Qingtong heaved a sigh of relief when she thought of this. She dived deeper into the abyss. There was no shelter in this abyss at all. There was rich power of the Great Path everywhere, but the resistance after the power of the Great Path turned into water was too strong. Moreover, in such an environment, no matter how strong Yu Mingqian was, it was impossible for her to directly lock onto Luo Qingtong's figure and appear beside her through so much power of the Great Path. Therefore, Luo Qingtong did not have to worry about being caught by Yu Mingqian. Otherwise, she would really be done for. Luo Qingtong's figure quickly swept forward. Soon, a dot of light appeared in front of her. That dot of light was very obvious and dazzling in the sea formed by the power of the Great Path. Almost at the moment when Luo Qingtong dived over, she saw it. She saw that the dot of light became brighter and brighter. Then, as Luo Qingtong moved forward, it became clearer and bigger. It turned out that it was a huge blood-red city. Luo Qingtong's eyes were shocked as she looked at the towering city in front of her that seemed to crawl at the bottom of the abyss like a giant beast. The size of this city alone was already beyond her imagination. In Luo Qingtong's eyes, this city stretched as if there was no end to it. It was extremely vast and boundless. Luo Qingtong could not find any words to describe the towering, majestic, domineering, and fierce city of this city. Above this blood-red city, there were countless spikes erected. The slightly flickering dark blood-red light and fierce color was at the bottom of this dark abyss. The city walls were mottled and broken, and the city's body was seriously collapsed, but it did not detract from its charm and momentum. Beside this blood-red city, there was an existence that made Luo Qingtong suck in a breath of cold air. She saw a huge beast that was almost as tall as the sky and the earth. Its huge head seemed to be able to break the sky of the abyss. It crawled beside the blood-red city. The gigantic spirit beast curled up its body. Layer by layer, it almost filled the entire bottom of the abyss. It was unknown how long it had been dead. Its entire body, except for its head, had turned into white bones. The skeletons stood in great numbers. However, that malevolent and domineering head was still held high above the pile of bones. The two bony wings around its body spread out as if it was about to fly. However, its skeletal wings had been broken long ago, and many of the bones in its body had been shattered. Above the raised head there was even flesh and blood. A huge wound appeared on its forehead. But even so, one could still see the awe-inspiring might and domineering aura of this giant beast when it was alive. Torch Dragon. Little Pig sucked in a breath of cold air when he saw the giant beast. Chapter 27:14. She saw the Torch Dragon's claw resting on the majestic Blood City, obviously showing a protective stance. It flapped its wings and looked like it was about to soar into the sky. However, that claw of the Torch Dragon was resting on the majestic Blood City. Could it be that it was not about to soar into the sky but was flapping its wings and puffing out its chest to defend against some kind of attack? And that attack was directed at this Blood City? This ancient beast was the guardian spiritual beast of this Blood City? Luo Qingtong took a deep breath at the thought of this. She knew what it meant to have a divine beast as a guardian spiritual beast, and an ancient behemoth as a guardian spiritual beast. It meant that the owner of this Blood City was far more powerful than the Torch Dragon. Otherwise, why would such a gigantic beast listen to the other party's orders and protect this Blood City with its life? One must know that this Torch Dragon was obviously killed in the process of protecting this Blood City. However, why did the other party not destroy this blood city after killing the torch dragon? Moreover, as an ancient beast, the torch dragon's flesh and blood contained an infinite amount of energy, all of which were the essence of the great Tao of heaven and earth. Why did the other party not take it away? As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she flew towards the blood city. The closer she got, the more she could feel the majesty of this blood city. That sharp and terrifying aura had not dissipated after so many years. Not only that, the aura of the torch dragon was even more terrifying. Even after so many years, its flesh and blood, even though it was an ancient beast, had turned into white bones. However, the terrifying aura and coercion of the great Tao surrounding its body did not diminish in the least. Luo Qingtong could not even get within 100 meters of it. The latter's body was surrounded by an extremely terrifying and powerful energy. Under the influence of this energy, no one who was weaker than it could even dream of getting close to it. This ancient beast, even in death, would not allow its dignity to be tarnished. Luo Qingtong looked at this ancient beast and did not go any closer. Instead, she turned towards the huge blood city. Fortunately, the blood city and the torch dragon's corpse were far enough apart. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong could forget about getting close to this blood city. Looking at the sea of spiritual energy that was faintly discernible as it revolved around the torch dragon and the blood city, Luo Qingtong understood that this was the reason why the power of the great Tao was so rich here. At the same time, this was also the source of the heart of the continent that produced the great Tao spirit and spiritual beasts. Previously, Luo Qingtong did not think that there was any special treasure that could cause such a change. However, after seeing this blood city and the torch dragon, she no longer had any doubts. After all, putting everything else aside, the energy emanating from the torch dragon's flesh and blood alone was enough to cause a mutation in the heart of the continent in this abandoned continent. Not to mention this was the blood city. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she immediately dashed into the blood city. Just as she dashed into the dilapidated but still imposing city gate, there was a loud boom. Not far behind Luo Qingtong, 1,000 ripples were stirred up. It was Yu Mingqian. She had also noticed what was happening. She quickly flew over. Seeing his figure, Luo Qingtong's eyes instantly darkened. Tiske, I almost forgot about him. Luo Qingtong's figure dashed towards the blood city. Chapter 27:15. There was no other reason other than the fact that there was no energy of the Great Path in this red city. The ocean of energy of the Great Path seemed to be blocked by an invisible force. This situation was very unfavorable to Luo Qingtong. Previously, she relied entirely on the resistance and shielding effect of the Great Path to prevent Yu Mingqian from catching up to her. Now that there was no obstruction from the Great Path, it was very likely that Yu Mingqian would be able to catch up to her soon. Quick. Can you sense where is the place that is emitting the rich power of the Great Tao in this blood city? Luo Qingtong asked Little Pig who was in her arms. The red city blocked the energy of the Great Path. Then, the only place that was emitting the rich energy of the Great Path could only be the location of the rare treasure. Luo Qingtong could only hope that Little Pig could sense it. Otherwise, she would not have the chance to find the rare treasure in such a huge red city. As for Xiao Tuanzi, Luo Qingtong could not count on it. Initially, she thought that the rich energy of the Great Path here could awaken the little guy. However, Luo Qingtong had been moving in the ocean of energy of the Great Path for so long, but it did not move at all. Obviously, the energy of the Great Path here was not suitable for it to absorb. Since that was the case, Luo Qingtong could only place her hopes on the rare treasure. When Luo Qingtong's words were heard, Little Pig quickly replied, "Yes. It's right in front." As it spoke, it lifted its little hoof and pointed towards the center of the red city. "All right." Luo Qingtong nodded and leaped towards the center of the red city. As she leaped towards the center of the red city, Yu Mingqian's figure had also rushed into the red city's gate. Xie. Seeing Luo Qingtong's figure disappear from his sight, Yu Mingqian's eyes narrowed and immediately chased after her. The torch dragon and the red city here had also shocked him. To think that such a terrifying existence was hidden in this abandoned continent. It was obvious that the ancient divine object that the demonic moon sect had mentioned before was true. However, did Xie appear here by accident, or did he purposely rush here? Yu Mingqian's heart sank. He realized that he couldn't understand the person in front of him anymore. He had originally thought that she was just an ordinary youth with some strange abilities. Later on he found out that she was a woman. Moreover, she was not lacking in scheming, strength and talent. In the end, it escaped from his hands again and again, causing him to have no choice but to run around tirelessly. Yu Mingqian had never met a woman as difficult to deal with as Luo Qingtong. She had broken his understanding of women, the kind of troublesome, disdainful existence. Yu Mingqian's eyes narrowed. She inexplicably wanted to investigate Luo Qingtong's identity as a woman. Chapter 27:16. In the middle of the huge central square, there was a statue that seemed to be able to support the heaven and earth, standing in the middle of the square. From the appearance of the statue in the square, it seemed to be a woman. Her body was curvaceous from top to bottom, and she was wearing a tight blood-red armor, which made her look unusually charming and seductive. For some reason, the face of the statue seemed to be hidden in a cloud of mist, which made it difficult for people to see clearly. Even if Luo Qingtong had activated her blood-red eyes to the extreme, the face of the statue still seemed to be shrouded in a veil, and it was impossible to see clearly. This statue had been here for who knows how many years. It had obviously experienced the collapse of the city, the destruction of the buildings, and the bones of the torch dragon, but there was not a single bit of damage on its body. Not only that, the luster on the surface was shining, revealing the skin as white as snow, black hair like a waterfall, and the blood-red armor was biting cold. It looked like a real person, vivid and lifelike. If not for the fact that her body was so huge, and that the bottom was connected to the base of the bronze liquid, Luo Qingtong would have thought that this was a real person. And it was a giant. This is the owner of this blood-red city? Luo Qingtong looked at the statue that appeared in the central square of the city. Usually, people who would appear here would be the founder of a city or its owner. There should be no doubt about the identity of this woman. But for some reason, Luo Qingtong looked at this statue, and inexplicably felt that it gave her a very familiar feeling. She felt that she had seen this statue somewhere before. But it was obviously her first time in this blood-red city, and it was also her first time seeing such a statue. If she had seen it before with this statue's special temperament and aura, and the face that could not be seen clearly, how could she forget it? Just as Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, suddenly, there was a sound of a figure breaking through the air behind her. It was Yu Mingqian who had caught up. Bang! Yu Mingqian's figure spread out, his sleeves like wings, and with a boom he smashed a half-collapsed wall and building in front of him into powder. In an instant, his figure appeared at the end of the alley behind Luo Qingtong. And all the buildings behind the alley that were in the way of Yu Mingqian's pursuit of Luo Qingtong were all smashed into powder. He did not believe that Luo Qingtong could hide in this city for long. Seeing Yu Mingqian's figure appear, Luo Qingtong's pupils shrank. Her gaze quickly swept across the square in front of her. Except for that huge statue, there was nothing else in this central square. The place was so big that it took up almost 1/5 of the entire Blood City. There was only a statue standing there, not even a single building. So, where was the so-called treasure? Luo Qingtong's gaze instantly. Based on her knowledge, rare treasures should be the treasures in this Blood City. Since it was a treasure, it would definitely be placed in the most important place to be protected. But at this moment, except for this statue, there was nothing else in this square. So, where was the treasure? Humph, did you point to the wrong place? Luo Qingtong gritted her teeth and asked Little Pig in her arms. Chapter 27:17. When Luo Qingtong's voice sounded, Little Pig's voice also sounded hastily. No, it's here. Master, it's this statue. The power of the great Tao emanating from its body is the densest. That rare treasure should be on its body. When Little Pig's voice sounded, Luo Qingtong's gaze instantly froze. On this statue? She looked at the statue and quickly found something wrong on the latter's wrist. On this statue's wrist, there were 2 blood-colored bracelets. These 2 blood-colored bracelets were engraved with the blood-colored red spider lily, intertwining with the blood-colored devil's snare. They intertwined with each other, forming the posture of twin lotuses. It made the 2 blood-red bracelets seem like divine objects that were being consecrated on the other side of the Yellow Springs River. They carried a devilish and enchanting aura, and they seemed like divine objects of the heavens and the earth, pure and inviolable. These 2 bracelets were real bracelets, not decorations on the statue. Luo Qingtong looked at them, and there was a flash of astonishment on her face. She didn't expect that the treasures in this Blood City were actually these 2 bracelets. The dense power of the great Tao emanating from the statue was emitted by these bracelets. Let's go. Although she didn't know if these 2 bracelets could solve her current crisis, she still didn't know. But at this moment, Luo Qingtong could only treat a dead horse as a living one. One had to know that at this moment, in this huge plaza, there was no shelter other than this statue. It was impossible to pass through this plaza and leave from other places. Without the buildings and alleyways to block her, Luo Qingtong couldn't outrun Yu Mingqian. And the latter's strength and speed were at their peak in this open space. As long as the other party wanted to, they could definitely catch her before she could escape. As for the trick, Luo Qingtong had already used it once before. She wasn't stupid enough to believe that Yu Mingqian would fall for it a second time. Therefore she could only place her hope on these two bracelets. Hopefully they would be of some use. Hopefully they weren't just for show. With that in mind, Luo Qingtong leaped up and charged towards the huge statue. Just as her figure disappeared, Yu Mingqian's figure instantly appeared where she had been. With a swoosh, he stretched out his hand and instantly caught the afterimage that was left in the air. Boom! Yu Mingqian's figure disappeared in an instant. She once again chased after Luo Qingtong. Without the obstruction of the building, Luo Qingtong's figure was completely visible in front of him. Yu Mingqian closed in on Luo Qingtong in an instant. With his strength at the 9th level of the Earth Martial Realm, it would be too easy for him to catch up with Luo Qingtong. However, Luo Qingtong would not allow herself to be captured without a fight. Without the obstruction of the buildings, she still had her bloody eyes. Although she couldn't prevent Yu Mingqian from catching up to her like before. But if he wanted to catch her, it wouldn't be so simple. Boom! Luo Qingtong seemed to have eyes on the back of her head. Almost at the moment when Yu Mingqian was about to grab her, her figure disappeared in front of him. Luo Qingtong's pupil technique was activated to the extreme. The bloody light in her eyes was so red that it seemed to drip blood. The whites of her eyes were bright red as if they were dyed with blood. It was extremely demonic and evil. Chapter 27:18. Boom! Luo Qingtong's figure moved around in the air. Every time she stopped, she would avoid Yu Mingqian's next attack. Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes spun rapidly. Every movement of Yu Mingqian in the next second appeared in 3D in Luo Qingtong's eyes. A virtual scene appeared in her eyes. Paragon Ocular Technique of Foresight. This was a new ocular technique that Luo Qingtong had unlocked after ascending to the Paragon realm. This ability allowed her to foresee what would happen to her within a certain period of time. This event must be closely related to her. The time and range of the events that she could foresee were determined by Luo Qingtong's ocular technique and mental strength. Luo Qingtong had just unlocked this ability not long ago. The range and time that she could foresee was limited to 1 second of events that happened around her. However, this was enough to face Yu Mingqian's attack. However, this ocular technique consumed a lot of mental strength. After Luo Qingtong used it 5 or 6 times in a row, she felt that her eyes were swollen and the operation of the eye technique in her eyes was stagnant for a while. Obviously, this was due to excessive mental strength consumption. Once her mental strength was exhausted, Luo Qingtong would temporarily become blind. By then she could only wait for Yu Mingqian to catch her. Fortunately, after dodging Yu Mingqian's attacks a few times, Luo Qingtong was now near the bottom of the statue. Swoosh! Luo Qingtong's figure followed the bottom of the statue and climbed up its body. Yu Mingqian's eyes darkened when he saw this. He was not stupid. He saw Luo Qingtong's action of going straight for the statue and then looked at the statue that was different from the dilapidated scene in the Blood City. How could he not know that Luo Qingtong wanted something from the statue? Yu Mingqian's gaze turned extremely solemn as she thought about the power of the torch dragon outside the Bloody City and the existence of the ancient divine item. He looked up and saw Luo Qingtong quickly climbing up the statue. The young man's figure was unusually agile and light on this huge statue. In almost an instant, he had already climbed up to the statue's thigh. Yu Mingqian knew that it was impossible for him to catch Luo Qingtong. At the very least, not for the time being. This woman had broken many of his rules that he had never done before. This was the first time he had negotiated terms with someone who was weaker than him. This was the first time he had been tricked by someone. This was the first time he couldn't catch someone who was weaker than him. This was the first time he was helpless against someone. This person's strength was inferior to his status was inferior to his, and his influence was inferior to his. But time and time again he was defeated. If someone had told him before today that he would be defeated by someone who was inferior to him, Yu Mingqian definitely wouldn't have believed it. But at this moment he had to admit that he really couldn't do anything to Luo Qingtong. The path from the edge of the square to the statue was his last chance to catch Luo Qingtong. But she still managed to escape. Yu Mingqian didn't know how Luo Qingtong did it. But he knew that he couldn't let Luo Qingtong get the ancient divine item. Otherwise he would be the next unlucky one. Xie Qi, you forced me to do this. Yu Mingqian's voice was cold. In just an instant, an extremely powerful and terrifying aura gathered around him. The rays of annihilation light from the life blade and the death blade annihilated and transformed most of the power of the inscription patterns in front of them. At the same time, the two rays of annihilation light merged in an instant and turned into a Tai Chi Yin-Yang pattern. Then, with a boom, it collided with the power of the inscription patterns. And strange fireworks floated out of Luo Qingtong's body. Soul of all flames. Fusion of all flames. These fireworks in Luo Qingtong's body were all flame spirits condensed by her soul of all flames. At this moment, the power of these flame spirits was astonishing. Each of them was equal to her own power. Seeing that Luo Qingtong's body was about to collide with the attack, Yu Mingqian's face flashed with a strange color. To think that the other party would rather commit suicide than agree. Wait a minute. His pupils constricted as he saw Luo Qingtong's figure approaching the inscription pattern. With a swoosh, she took out a pile of golden threads. These threads weren't anything else. They were the threads of the 1,000 filaments king worm that Luo Qingtong had obtained previously. Luo Qingtong used these threads to condense a thread shield and blocked in front of her. Boom. The blood-red color in her eyes surged violently as she searched for the point in the inscription pattern that she needed. Chapter 27-21. Boom. Luo Qingtong's figure flew out along with the shield. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face was pale, but the curve of her lips was unusually evil and dazzling. You sent me on my way again. I can't thank you enough for your kindness. Luo Qingtong raised her finger and gave Yu Mingqian the middle finger. Yu Mingqian saw the two bracelets on the wrist of the statue as she flew past. Those two bracelets are real bracelets. Yu Mingqian instantly realized that Luo Qingtong's goal must be the two huge blood bracelets. The two blood bracelets should be the ancient divine objects that the people of the evil moon sect had told him about. Yu Mingqian's eyes darkened as he thought about it. He finally understood the purpose of Luo Qingtong rushing to block the inscription pattern. She wanted to use the impact of the inscription pattern and the silk shield to rush to the two blood bracelets. One had to know that the statue's hands were overlapped. Her hands were leaning on the sword and the tip of the sword was on the ground. The two bracelets were right next to each other. He could not let her get the two bracelets. Yu Mingqian's eyes narrowed and he made a decision in an instant. He wanted to use the power in his body. Although that power was not a good thing for him and he would have to pay a heavy price in the future, he did not care so much. Boom. Yu Mingqian's figure flew up in an instant. His figure seemed to pass through time and space in an instant, blending into the world. He appeared behind Luo Qingtong in an instant. The Sky Martial Arts realm. Yu Mingqian's speed was clearly due to the true inheritance of the Great Path. Otherwise it was impossible to be so fast. It was as if his body had become one with the world. Boom. When Yu Mingqian appeared behind Luo Qingtong, the latter had just rushed to the wrist of the statue and was about to touch the two bracelets. However, before Luo Qingtong could make a move, she heard a sharp wind behind her. Then an extremely cold murderous intent swept out in an instant. Boom. Yu Mingqian raised his hand and attacked Luo Qingtong. He could not give this woman any chance. If it were someone else, Yu Mingqian would definitely choose to capture them after his strength had soared. But this person was Xie Qi. Xie Qi, who could escape from his hands again and again in the venerable realm and forced him to use the forbidden power in his body. If he treated her as an ordinary person, Yu Mingqian would be hopelessly stupid. He would rather kill Luo Qingtong than give her the slightest chance to escape from him and obtain the two ancient godly items. Indecisiveness will only lead to chaos. Yu Mingqian's eyes narrowed and he did not hesitate at all. Luo Qingtong saw his strength soar and suddenly appeared behind her. Her pupils shrank in an instant. She had almost used up all her trump cards and the power in her body was gone. There was no way she could resist Yu Mingqian's attack. What should she do? Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes turned quickly. Yu Mingqian's figure was reflected in her pupils. She was using the power of foresight. However, just as she was about to use this eye technique, her eyes suddenly lit up. Chapter 27-22. Luo Qingtong's voice cried out in surprise. Yi Qianxian's figure was reflected in her blood-red eyes. At that moment, Yu Mingqian sneered and said in a deep voice, "Xie Qi, are you going to use this move again?" She had just used this trick to trick him into entering the abyss. This time she wanted to use the same trick again? Was he that stupid in her eyes? Yu Mingqian's eyes were cold. She didn't pay attention to Luo Qingtong's words. The attack in her hand didn't stop at all. She slapped towards Luo Qingtong. However, just as her hand was about to hit Luo Qingtong, it was grabbed by a large hand that was even fairer and stronger than her own. Boom! Yi Qianxian's figure appeared beside Luo Qingtong and blocked Yu Mingqian's attack. On the ring finger of his left hand, there was a dark black ring that flickered with a cold and sharp light. After Yi Qianxian entered the abyss, he couldn't sense Luo Qingtong and Yu Mingqian's auras because of the existence of the sea of spiritual energy formed by the power of the Great Path. Therefore he took out the sealed 10-directional dragon ring from his storage ring. Relying on the connection between the 10-directional dragon ring and the 9 Netherworld Phoenix ring, he found where Luo Qingtong and Yu Mingqian were. Seeing Yu Mingqian attack Luo Qingtong, his eyes were extremely cold and sharp. Boom! The power in his body violently rushed out of his body and blasted towards Yu Mingqian. That power aura wasn't the slightest bit inferior to Yu Mingqian's current strength. It was even boundless and incomparably vast. It was extremely strong. Boom! If Yu Mingqian and Yi Qianxian's strength were compared to that of a dragon, then Yu Mingqian's strength would be the true heavens. Yu Mingqian's sky martial realm strength would be a false dragon, and Yi Qianxian's would be a true dragon. The latter's strength was so great that it completely crushed the power that Yu Mingkue had forcibly raised in her body. Boom! The power of the two collided in midair. Against Yi Qianxian's power and aura, Yu Mingqian's power and aura kept retreating. Then, with a bang, his figure instantly retreated dozens of meters. A trail of blood flowed out from his mouth. You are also in the sky martial realm. Yu Mingqian's eyes were filled with shock. He looked at Yi Qianxian and wondered how he could be so strong. The strength of the heaven realm. Not only that, no matter if it was the strength of his aura or the berserk and usage of his power, they were all above him. After all, Yu Mingqian was also a battle soul master. His strength absolutely could not be compared to ordinary sky realm experts. His strength was far stronger than that of an ordinary martial artist. But Yi Qianxian had managed to force him back with just one move. The other party's strength was actually so strong. Yu Mingqian finally knew where his inexplicable fear towards Yi Qianxian came from. Yi Qianxian's eyes were cold as he looked at him without saying a word. Sky martial realm? If his meridians weren't restricted, how could he only display the strength of the sky martial realm? Just one strike was enough to turn him into ashes. How dare he injure his Qingtong? Yi Qianxian's eyes were cold. His gaze swept past the 10 Directions dragon ring on his left ring finger. With the 10 Directions dragon ring unsealed, Tiandu might be able to quickly track down his whereabouts. Yi Qianxian still had to save his strength to deal with Tiandu Emperor. He didn't want to waste it on Yu Mingqian. Chapter 27-23. Seeing this scene, Yu Mingqian's eyes abruptly trembled. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's hands had already touched the bracelets. Luo Qingtong was about to touch the bracelets before. If it weren't for this, Yu Mingqian wouldn't have recklessly raised his strength to the sky martial realm. He even gave up on capturing her and only wanted to kill her. It was because he was afraid that she would escape from his hands and obtain the bracelets. But at this moment his attack was blocked by Yi Qianxian. Luo Qingtong's hands immediately touched the 2 bracelets. In only an instant, the 2 bracelets fiercely emitted light. Their bodies spun in the air. With a boom, they broke free from the statue's wrist. Then with a whoosh they flew towards Luo Qingtong. Their bodies spun in the air. Then the more they flew, the smaller they became. In the end, they turned into 2 normal-sized bracelets. In an instant, they were put on Luo Qingtong's wrists. Ka-ka. After 2 light sounds, 2 blood-colored bracelets appeared on Luo Qingtong's wrists. Seeing this scene, Yu Mingqian's pupils shrank. He looked at Yi Qianxian, who was flying towards him. Then he looked at Luo Qingtong, who had already obtained the 2 Antiquity-era divine items. He knew that he couldn't stay here any longer. The strength of the white jade-masked man was really too strong. At this moment he didn't have any help by his side. Moreover, if he remembered correctly, there was a group of white jade-masked men by his side. If those people were to follow them here... Yu Mingqian's eyes suddenly darkened. Boom! In an instant the aura around his body started to surge. In only an instant, an enormous and complicated inscription formation that crossed time and space was formed under Yu Mingqian's feet. With Yu Mingqian's strength, he originally couldn't activate this formation. But at that moment he used the power within his body. With the strength of the heaven realm, if he went all out, he could completely activate the formation. This array formation was similar to the one that Song Cheng had used to summon Luo Qingtong to Heavenly Wind Inscription City. However, Yu Mingqian's formation only needed one person to activate it. It was much easier to operate than the Sky Wind Inscription City's formation. This was a formation that he had specially designed for himself. Only his aura could activate this formation. Not only that, but after the teleportation, the aura of the formation would immediately explode, making it impossible for others to track him down. Even inscriptionists who were more powerful than him couldn't do it. With a boom, the inscription pattern array beneath Yu Mingqian's feet activated. Yi Qianxian's gaze coldly landed on him. You want to leave? If Yu Mingqian hadn't used the inscription pattern array in front of him, Yi Qianxian might not have been able to stop him. But at this moment he used the inscription pattern array in front of him. Did he think that he could successfully leave? Yi Qianxian's eyes were cold. In only an instant, with a boom, a vast and majestic power rushed out of his body. It went straight into the space around Yu Mingqian and locked his body. Yu Mingqian's eyes were filled with shock and anger. The power that Yi Qianming had displayed at this moment was beyond his imagination. To be able to lock his body and the space around him in an instant, how could the opponent's strength be only in the heaven realm? This was not something that could be done by the heaven realm. Chapter 27-24. Boom. A blood-red light fell from the sky where Luo Qingtong was and enveloped her. Yi Qianxian's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. The scene of Luo Qingtong being taken away from him for no reason appeared in his mind. Without any hesitation, he appeared beside Luo Qingtong from where Yu Mingqian was. Qingtong. He grabbed Luo Qingtong's hand and in the next second, the two of them disappeared in the blood-red light. When they disappeared, Yu Mingqian's figure also disappeared from the inscription pattern array in an instant because Yi Qianxian's power was no longer blocking him. Luo Qingtong. Before he left, Yu Mingqian watched Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian disappear before his eyes. He had really lost completely this time. Not only did he not obtain any information about the inscription of God, but he also did not obtain the ancient divine item in this abandoned continent. Looking at the might of this blood-red city and the tyrannical power of the torch dragon outside, the two blood-red bracelets were clearly abnormally powerful. Unfortunately, they did not belong to him. And Luo Qingtong. She was clearly only in the venerable realm, but she had escaped from his hands again and again. It could be said that if not for Luo Qingtong's continuous escape and delay, Yu Mingqian would not have faced Yi Qianxian at all. Yu Mingqian did not know how Yi Qianxian could be so powerful. He was only in the sky martial realm, but he could instantly lock down the time and space around him, making it impossible for him to escape through the inscription pattern array. However, if Luo Qingtong had fallen into his hands from the beginning, he would have left with her and the two blood-red bracelets long ago. How could Yi Qianxian have caught up to him? All of this was because of Luo Qingtong. That woman. In Yu Mingqian's mind, the image of Luo Qingtong recovering her identity as a woman by the river appeared. Her gaze deepened, and in the end, her figure completely disappeared into the inscription pattern array. Boom. When Yu Mingqian disappeared, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian appeared in a blood-colored hall. That hall was extremely spacious, as if it was situated in the endless void, boundless and limitless. There was only a blood-red statue sitting on the throne at the very top. Its eyes were slightly lowered as it looked at them. The throne seemed to have been forged with countless blood and sharp weapons, shining with a cold, cold light. At the same time, there seemed to be countless streams of blood flowing on the throne. Countless sharp white bone spikes protruded from the edges of the throne and surrounded it. It looked like they were protecting the throne. White bone spikes were forged from fresh blood. Everything indicated the extraordinary origin of this throne and the bloodthirsty and domineering aura of the owner of this throne. Chapter 27-25. This place is a projection world. Projection world? Luo Qingtong looked at him. Yes. Yi Qianxian sized up the huge blood-colored hall, scanning it from top to bottom, left to right. This place is not a real world but a projection. This blood-colored palace is not here. Where we are is a place that it has projected through who knows how many thousands of miles. Luo Qingtong immediately understood when Yi Qianxian said this. It was like a mirage. It seemed to appear in front of her, but in fact, it was far away from her. But how did she appear in this blood-colored hall? Luo Qingtong thought, then looked at the two blood-colored bracelets on her wrists. Could it be because of these two bracelets? Luo Qingtong looked down, and Yi Qianxian followed her gaze and noticed the two bracelets. Did you get these from the statue? Then they should be the reason why you appeared in this blood-colored hall. Yi Qianxian did not see how Luo Qingtong obtained the bracelets. He was dealing with Yu Mingqian at the time. Yes. Luo Qingtong nodded. She looked at the blood-colored statue on the throne, thought for a moment and said to Yi Qianxian, "Qianren, let's go and take a look." There was nothing in this blood-colored hall now, only the throne and the blood-colored statue. He was afraid that the purpose of the two bracelets leading them here was because of these two items. Luo Qingtong walked towards the huge throne, and Yi Qianxian followed beside her, holding her tightly. The two of them approached the huge throne and saw the blood-colored statue sitting on it. Its hands were placed on the blood-colored armrests on both sides, and it was surrounded by eerie white bones. It looked very domineering, as if it was looking down on the world. Luo Qingtong noticed that the blood-colored statue was dressed neatly, but there were no decorations on her white jade-like wrists. Are these two bracelets missing? Luo Qingtong looked at the blood-colored statue, thought for a moment, and raised her hands to take off the two bracelets on her wrist, and put them on the statue's wrists. For some reason Luo Qingtong felt that there should be two bracelets on the statue's wrists. And these two bracelets should be part of the statue's body. When Luo Qingtong's hands touched the statue's wrists and put the bracelets on her wrist, there was a boom, and the entire statue suddenly lit up. The statue seemed to have come to life. Her skin was like jade, her black hair was like a waterfall, and the blood-colored armor on her body was mighty and domineering. "You're back." The face covered by a thin layer of mist looked up in an instant, and a pair of eyes seemed to penetrate through thousands of worlds, staring at her. Luo Qingtong noticed that the statue's eyes were actually the same as hers, a pair of blood-red eyes. Magnificent like rubies, strange like blood. Countless lives and deaths and the cycle of all living things were all reflected in this pair of gorgeous and dazzling red eyes. Blood-red eyes. The statue actually also had blood-red eyes. Luo Qingtong's eyes widened slightly, and before she could respond to the statue's words, the latter's figure suddenly collapsed in front of her. Chapter 27-26. Boom, boom, boom. Luo Qingtong's body suddenly shone brightly. She turned back into a young girl in an instant. The birthmark on her face also disappeared in an instant. Boom. Her body suddenly released a vast and majestic willpower that was like that of a god or a demon. Boom. Luo Qingtong's mind suddenly flashed with scenes. She saw the Blood City was vast and powerful. A woman in blood-red armor stood proudly at the top of the city. She looked into the distance with her head held high. Boom. In front of her, there were countless thunderbolts and black clouds rolling. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. Seeing this scene, Luo Qingtong heard the woman in blood-red armor sneered and said, "Tian Dao, you want to destroy me?" Luo Qingtong looked at the young girl in blood-red armor. Her face was the same as the statue Luo Qingtong saw in the Blood City Square and in the main hall. It was blurry. But Luo Qingtong could be sure that she was the statue woman, because she was wearing the two blood bracelets on both of her hands. Luo Qingtong looked at the woman with her head held high and looked in the direction of the Tian Dao. Those thunderbolts were vast and boundless. They were as thick as a hurricane and covered the sky and the earth. Just by looking at them, one could feel the terrifying power contained in those thunderbolts. The power of these thunderbolts was enough to destroy the sky and the earth. Luo Qingtong felt a little suffocated just looking at them. But the young girl in blood-red armor standing proudly on top of the Blood City did not have any change in expression. Luo Qingtong watched as she stood on top of the bloody city. Then, with a boom, her figure suddenly flew out and appeared in the middle of the thunderbolts that were rushing towards her. Boom. Luo Qingtong looked at the blood-red bracelets on her hands. A dazzling light flashed across the sky. Then, with a boom, a pair of blood-red gloves appeared on her hands. In the next second, she waved her hands fiercely. Heaven and Earth Tyrant Fist. As the woman swung her arms, her hands met the thunderbolts in front of her. Enormous thunderbolts that were thick enough to destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. In the blink of an eye, it shattered into countless pieces in the woman's hand. Boom, boom. Between heaven and earth, countless sounds of thunder and lightning could be heard. Countless holes seemed to have opened up between heaven and earth. The world split apart and energy overflowed in all directions. The heavens and the earth fell silent, and all sounds were silent. Luo Qingtong looked at the earth-shattering scene in front of her. The light in her eyes was exceptionally bright and passionate. What a powerful punch. She wanted to learn. The red light in Luo Qingtong's eyes flickered. Her blood-red eyes kept replaying the moment that the woman had punched out. From the angle of the punch to the way it was punched, the strength of the muscle trembling, and the route of the power transmission, everything was slowly presented in Luo Qingtong's eyes. And as her blood-red eyes flickered, a pair of blood-red bracelets appeared on her hands. They were also faintly glowing. A large amount of comprehension of the moves was transmitted into Luo Qingtong's body, helping her to analyze that punch. If not for this, it would be impossible for Luo Qingtong to analyze the power of that punch. But now, with the help of the blood-red bracelets. Chapter 27:27. Boom boom boom. While Luo Qingtong was comprehending in her own consciousness in the real world, her body suddenly moved. Rays of blood-red light were emitted from the two bracelets that appeared in her hands. In an instant, they turned into a pair of gloves, wrapping around Luo Qingtong's hands. Then a mysterious force of will wrapped around Luo Qingtong's body. As if it was moving with the wind, Luo Qingtong's body moved as if it was being guided by someone. Boom. She stretched her hands forward. When she stretched her hands forward, the air in the entire great hall surged. The wind was blowing and the clouds were surging. Yi Qianming had been paying attention to Luo Qingtong. He wanted to see if there was anything wrong with her so that he could intervene in time. However, when Luo Qingtong stretched out her hands in an instant, even he felt a great amount of pressure. Feeling the change in the spiritual energy in the great hall, his eyes narrowed. Then, without making a sound, he dashed to the distance. He could see that Luo Qingtong was comprehending some kind of technique at this moment. If he was not wrong, it should have been given to her by the statue just now. It could also be given to her by the two bracelets in her hands. But no matter which one it was a good thing for Luo Qingtong. The stronger Luo Qingtong was, the better. Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy and anticipation. He was not afraid that Luo Qingtong would be stronger than him in the future. As long as she could do it, even if he was protected by her and became her pet boy, so what? To truly love someone, it was not to lock her under his wings and imprison her in the name of love. Instead, it was to let her soar and let her become better and stronger. Yi Qianming was never afraid of Luo Qingtong's strength. He was only afraid that she was not strong enough. Before he could arrive in time, she would not be able to protect herself well. Boom. When Luo Qingtong moved, the entire Blood City trembled violently. Luo Qingtong's Scarlet Basilica projection world was actually still within the Scarlet City. It was just in another space. At this moment, following Luo Qingtong's actions, the spirit qi in the entire Scarlet Hall surged, and the Scarlet City outside also trembled. The sea of spiritual qi formed by the power of the Great Way where the Blood-Red City was located was even more turbulent. Huge waves roared and surged recklessly. Boom, boom. The sea of spiritual energy under the abyss roared and surged like an angry dragon. The water-like power of the Great Way swept up like raging waves, constantly rushing out of the pitch-black abyss. The overflowing Great Path energy shocked Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others who had just arrived at the abyss. Just as they were about to enter the abyss, they were forced out by the roaring and surging power of the Great Path. Such a rich Great Path energy, once it went berserk, it was quite terrifying. Chapter 27:28. What's going on? In the cave world, Zhan Beiyue and the others had to risk their lives to kill the evil moon sect members who had gone berserk. They were heavily injured as well. Just as they were about to enter the heart of the continent, they sensed the violent energy fluctuations from the abyss, as well as the terrifyingly dense aura of the power of laws. That aura was more than 100 times stronger than the heart of the continent. Could it be that they had been searching for so long and had found the wrong place? That ancient godly item wasn't in the heart of the continent at all, but somewhere else in the cave world? Didn't that mean that their judgment was wrong from the start? However, when they entered the cave world, including the previous few investigations, there was no other place with a denser Great Path energy than the heart of the continent. Zhan Beiyue and the others were afraid of making a mistake, so they were very careful and cautious. They checked back and forth many times, which was why they were discovered by the evil moon sect members. At the same time, they had also recruited people from the Lian and Chu families. If not, why would there be so much trouble? In the end, they were still wrong. Judging from the commotion, it was obvious that the ancient godly item had been obtained by someone. Zhan Beiyue gritted his teeth when he thought of Yu Mingqian, who had chased after Luo Qingtong, and Yi Qianming, who had left after her. He didn't know who had obtained the ancient godly item. However, it was obvious that no matter who had obtained the ancient godly item, they wouldn't be able to deal with them. Let's go. Without hesitation, Zhan Beiyue left with the Zhan family. Behind them, the people from the Lian and Chu families looked at each other in dismay. They looked at the heart of the continent that was close at hand and didn't dare to enter again. The Zhan family had left. Did they think that they were more powerful than the Zhan family? One had to know that their lives were obtained from Luo Qingtong's trade with the Zhan family. If not for that, they would have died in the hands of the evil moon sect members. One must know that the people from the Zhan family weren't some kind people. If it were not for the deal with Luo Qingtong, they would have been used as human shields when the demonic moon sect members went berserk. With such thoughts in mind, they no longer had any wild thoughts in their hearts. They directly rushed out of the cave world. Although Chu Yuqing and the others weren't willing to give up and wanted to obtain the Empyrean grass, they didn't dare to force their way into the heart of the continent. Therefore they gave up and left. Sigh, what a pity. Chu Yuqing gritted his teeth and looked in the direction of the abyss. What was going on? How could there be such a huge commotion? Could it be related to the purpose of the Zhan family's visit? That was a force from a 3-star region or above. Who knew what they were looking for in this abandoned continent? Fortunately, they seemed to want to hide their whereabouts. Therefore, they did not send too many strong people. Otherwise, if they encountered them, they would really die without a burial ground. However, the thing that these people were looking for had caused such a ruckus. Could it be that someone else had obtained it? They didn't know who it was. However, it shouldn't be Luo Xiaoqi. She had been chased out by the black-cloaked man. The latter was extremely powerful and could control the demonic moon sect members for his own use. Chapter 27-29. As Chu Yuqing thought this, he inexplicably heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't know why, but after facing Luo Qingtong several times and being slapped in the face, he had developed a sense of fear towards this venerable realm youth. Don't be fooled by how he usually looked down on Luo Qingtong. In fact, he was terrified, but he didn't show it. He was afraid that others would see through it and lose face. Who would dare to believe it? He was a top disciple of the Tianfeng domain's overlord family, yet he was afraid of a venerable realm youth. If word got out, he was afraid that others would laugh their heads off. While Chu Yuqing heaved a sigh of relief, Chu Yufei was also very happy. She looked in the direction of the abyss and carefully controlled her expression so that she wouldn't laugh out loud. Luo Xiaoqi was dead? She was actually dead. Her dream had come true. She didn't have to worry about her causing trouble for her anymore. As for that fool Chu Lingfeng, she had to go back and discuss it with her mother. No matter what, this scourge couldn't be left alive. He was already in the human martial realm. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before he could reach the 9th level of the human martial realm. One had to know that the increase of a small realm was the accumulation of power. And this was Chu Lingfeng's strong point. Once he reached the peak of the human martial realm, perhaps they wouldn't be able to touch him? Not to mention that he still had that bitch of a mother, whom the head of the family could never forget. No matter what, they had to get rid of Chu Lingfeng. They couldn't let him continue to grow like this. While Chu Yufei couldn't help but reveal a sinister expression, Chu Xiaofeng, Gu Yifeng, and the others all looked very disappointed. This time Xiaoqi Shi, Hu Zhan's eyes were red. Gu Yifeng lowered his head and didn't speak, but tightened his grip on the Dragon Slayer spear in his hand. The enchanting smile on Ouyang Yingyu's face also disappeared. Alright, don't think too much about it. Perhaps Xiaoqi is a good person and will be fine. She forced a smile and comforted the people around her. Gu Yifeng, Chu Xiaofeng, and the others listened without speaking. Ouyang Yingyu's words were clearly meant to comfort them. If Luo Xiaoqi was fine, why didn't she come back with those white jade masked men? In everyone's mind, it never occurred to them that Luo Qingtong might be the one who obtained the treasure. After all, Yu Mingquan was too strong. Everyone thought that it was already good enough that Luo Qingtong could be rescued by Yi Qianming in time. How was it possible to obtain an ancient divine artifact and cause such a huge commotion? So something must have happened to Luo Qingtong. Everyone was very sad. Along the way the atmosphere was gloomy. While they were escaping from the cave world in the Crimson Hall, Luo Qingtong's movements became faster and faster. At first she only stretched out a fist, but then she began to speed up her movements. It was still the same punching motion. However, as the speed of Luo Qingtong's punches increased, the power of Luo Qingtong's punches became stronger and stronger. Boom, boom, boom. Inside the hall, countless violent spiritual energy surged wildly, hitting the surrounding barriers. Outside the Crimson City, the huge sea of spiritual energy was like a storm, a hurricane, and waves roaring and sweeping. Finally, after punching countless times, Luo Qingtong found the point in the dark. Heaven and Earth Tyrant Fist. Boom. Chapter 27-30. Bang. Luo Qingtong punched out. In an instant, the wind and clouds in the blood-colored hall stirred up. The violent and terrifying power of spirit chi formed a huge hurricane in midair. It was as if it wanted to tear everything apart as it blasted forward. Then, with a boom, the huge blood-colored throne in front of Luo Qingtong in front of the blood-colored hall was torn into pieces by her attack. Blood and white bones flew all over the sky. In this tragic and magnificent scene, the entire blood-colored hall exploded into pieces in an instant. It turned out that the heaven and earth tyrant fist that Luo Qingtong had learned was the only way to leave this blood-colored hall by breaking the projection world. Otherwise she would be trapped here until she died. Now that Luo Qingtong had learned the heaven and earth tyrant fist, the blood-colored hall that she was in immediately shattered. The moment the blood-colored hall shattered, the sea of spirit chi in the entire abyss erupted with an earth-shattering roar. Then, the power of the great path that filled the sky suddenly surged out. The power of the great path, which was so dense that it had turned into water, seemed to have lost control in an instant. It roared fiercely from the abyss and diffused in all directions. Such a terrifying and heavy power of the heavens and earth was not something that this abandoned continent could withstand. In an instant, the mountains and rivers collapsed and trees snapped wherever the power of the great path spread. On the other hand, the spirit beasts in the dense forest were drowned by the terrifying and vast spiritual chi. They could not absorb such a large amount of power of the great path at all. They could only explode and die. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the entire cave world turned into a hellish existence. No one knew how terrifying this sea of spirit chi was. No one knew that they had been trapped in the abyss before. Now that they had escaped, they were about to destroy the world. Boom, boom, boom. The people from the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan had just rushed to the entrance of the cave world when they heard an explosion between heaven and earth. Then, the sea of power of the great path that filled the sky rushed over like a flood. The violent waves that were set off drowned most of the cave world in an instant. The rest of the tide was rushing in their direction. Seeing this scene, everyone was horrified to the extreme. They hurriedly ran outside with all their might. They had just rushed out of the cave. Boom. The tide that filled the sky suddenly surged out from behind them and poured into the abandoned continent in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. Countless cracks appeared on the ground. After the sea of spirit chi filled the entire cave world, it began to expand outwards. A series of deep ravines appeared on the abandoned continent. Then, with a loud boom, they exploded. The entire abandoned continent was in an earthquake as if it could be swallowed and annihilated at any time. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst such a loud noise, the powerhouses from the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan who were guarding outside finally felt that something was wrong. They looked at each other and then hurriedly rushed into the abandoned continent. When they saw the scene on the abandoned continent, their faces were instantly filled with horror. Chapter 27:31. Their eyes were filled with shock, and they had no idea what was going on. Where did this vast, earth-shaking power come from? How did it appear on this abandoned continent? The people from the Tianfeng Chu family and the Flying Star Lien family had only come for the Tianluo grass. How could they have known that such a terrifying and majestic power was hidden in this seemingly barren abandoned continent? Looking at the roaring spiritual chi ocean that seemed to want to destroy everything, everyone instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian appeared in the square in the Crimson City. After the Crimson Projection Hall shattered, Luo Qingtong regained her consciousness and was transported out of the hall with Yi Qianxian. At this moment, the huge crimson statue on the huge square had disappeared. In its place was a huge teleportation array. The array was glowing faintly. It was obvious that it was a one-time teleportation array. Once it was activated, it would immediately explode and disappear. Luo Qingtong looked at the huge teleportation array and frowned slightly. She could sense that a huge change had taken place outside, and it seemed to be caused by her. Was it because she had obtained the 2 crimson bracelets? Luo Qingtong looked at the 2 crimson bracelets on her wrists. At this moment, the 2 crimson bracelets were quietly on her wrists, and there was nothing strange about them. They looked just like 2 beautiful crimson bracelets. However, Luo Qingtong clearly remembered the earth-shattering punch that she had unleashed in the world of consciousness. The evil blood bracelet was one of the evil blood sets. The hegemonic fist of heaven and earth that was unleashed with it as the foundation was extremely powerful and could completely destroy heaven and earth. This was the message that the 2 bracelets had transmitted to her back then. However, Luo Qingtong's current strength was not enough to unleash the full power of this move. Moreover, the evil blood bracelet was severely damaged, and the power it contained was less than 1% of its original power. It was unable to assist Luo Qingtong in unleashing this move again. Without the assistance of the evil blood bracelet, Luo Qingtong would only be invincible among her peers when unleashing this move. However, with the assistance of the evil blood bracelet, Luo Qingtong's hegemonic fist of heaven and earth would be invincible among those below the sky martial arts realm. This was because the evil blood bracelet was severely damaged, and its power was greatly reduced. Otherwise, her strength would be far more than this. Luo Qingtong was extremely delighted when she thought of the various messages transmitted from the evil blood bracelet. These two bracelets were really the best gains from her trip to the heavens and earth. It was a pity that the evil blood bracelet required a terrifying amount of energy to charge.